Okay, I'm going to show you this is my game of my uncle, Alexei Shirov. Welcome, welcome, Prophylaxis. So here we have Shirov playing the white pieces versus Marcus Strangle. So Alexei Shirov playing the white pieces, his opponent's playing a modern defense. It depends how black plays it, but it could transpose to a perk defense, but it's a modern. Okay, so c6, modern defense. Shirov, you can see, has a lot of space here, and, you know, it's very typical of the hyper-modern games, like the perk, like the modern. Okay, bishop to g4, bishop to e3, all developing moves. Queen b6 up. So I recall when I was having lessons with Grandmaster Alex Shabalov, who of course was a peer of, Alexei Shirov. We were peers with Alexei Shirov, and we're both trained by Mikhail Tal. Shabalov told me, I think I was playing somebody who played the perk or something, and they went here and attacked my b-pawn, and I went here. I went rook b1 because I intended originally to castle to the king side, so I didn't really think about it. I just was like, okay, I'm going to go here. And Shabalov was like, you're never going to play rook b1 again, ever. You're always going to play queen to d2. And you're going to sacrifice that pawn. And I was like, but this, oh, please, no, but I have rights. And he was like, no. He's like, no. You're never going to guard that pawn, ever. And it was also in a perk defense. It wasn't like a London or something. It was, and I was like, please. And please let me get a word in. He's like, no. When somebody goes here and you're fully developed, and your opponent's going fishing, give it to him. And I was like, okay. No more questions. And so when I saw this game by Alexei Shirov, of course he went queen to d2. And he said, there you go, have it, right? And of course rook to b1 would come with rook takes b7. And it was funny because this is a game, of course, of Alexei Shirov, who's also from that Latvian school of chess, and he played queen to d2. There's no way he's guarding that. So knight f6 was played. Bishop to e2, still offering the pawn, of course. Pawn to d5, e5, and then castle. So one thing we can see about this game is that white has a massive space advantage. And space can be a liability, but it's mostly a strength. And the way it can be a liability is if you have space, but you don't actually use it to restrict your opponent's pieces, and you allow them to break at it, your space can actually be a target for your opponents, and you can find yourself overextended sometimes. The positive of space is that you restrict your opponent's pieces and your pieces have more mobility. Bishop to e2. Okay, so white has a big space advantage and a lead in development. White has a safe king, good development, all minor pieces in the game, nice pawn wedge in the center. So, fantastic. So, white's in control. But this could go away. Maybe not the space, but the development lead can go away if you give black time. So queen a5 was played, and now Shirov did not give Marcus Strangle any time to get caught up in development. And so Shirov launched his attack. And he launched his attack toward the king by starting with the move knight to g5, which I would say isn't a hard move to see because it does so many great things. So, for example, it threatens, well, first of all, it threatens the bishop, so we can assume that there might be a trade there. But possibly, and more importantly, there's ideas of pawn to e6. And if we can get the move pawn to e6 in, that would really put a damper in Black's position. I mean, that would be a tough thing to miss to meet. So bishop takes e2 was played, and by elimination that's played, because if you go bishop to f5 or something, White's just going to roll you off the board with their pawns. g4, and just all the pawns just going to be rolling down. Okay, so bishop takes e2, queen takes e2, and now Strangle made a big mistake because he never received a lesson from a pupil of the Tal School of Chess. But I have. Okay, I have, and I learned one thing. This is my half of the board. This is your half. Okay? That's your half. So far, groundbreaking education I'm giving you here. Okay, so here's the Latvian school rule, which I learned through my coach, Alexander Shabalov, and which Shirov, of course, learned directly from Mikhail Tal. When you decide to jump your knight into enemy territory, which is what Shirov did, if your opponent attacks it with a pawn, you cannot go backward. It's not allowed. If you go backward after crossing into enemy territory with your knight in Latvian School of Chess, you get a ruler to your hand. Okay? Strangle didn't know that rule. He didn't. He played h6. He didn't know that there was a rule. Thank you, Rocky Mountain Chess. He didn't know there was a rule in the Latvian School of Chess. So even if Shirov didn't want to play what he did, he was going to do it. Because if he didn't do it, let's see, when was this game played? It was 1989. If he didn't do it, he knows that Mikhail Tal would have spanked his bottom. So Strangle didn't know that. And Strangle said, get out of my position. And Shirov said, okay, I'll go. There you go. Right there. I can't go back. It's against the rules. I don't want to get a spanking. I gotta follow the rules. Knight takes f7. Beautiful. Beautiful follow-up, though, I should say. Because it looks like a bolt from the blue. Like, of course Strangle didn't see this. Because he's like, what the hell is this? Like, you're just giving me a knight for a pawn? Like, give me a break. So, of course Strangle takes the knight, because you sort of have to take the knight when somebody sacrifices it on you like that. You're going to lose either way, so you at least need to be up a piece. Lose up a piece, okay? Don't lose down a piece, too. Then you're screwed. So, what did Shirov play here, which is just absolutely fantastic follow-up to this knight takes f7? Exactly, f5. Beautiful. Gorgeous, gorgeous play so far by Shirov. So, first of all, e6 is a threat, but knowing Shirov, he's probably not even looking at getting the piece back. He's looking at assaults toward the king. And if we can eliminate the g-pawn, the queen flies in and everything. So, okay. Strangle took the pawn, and Shirov played queen to h5, which was the whole idea, or one of the ideas of playing the move f5, is to pry open the diagonal. Okay, so the king tucks itself away. Rook d to f1. Shirov, it seems like Shirov is casually bringing pieces into the game, but just have a look at Black's position. Indeed, White sacrificed a piece and a pawn, or it's not a pawn, right? Because he took a pawn. He sacrificed a piece to get this position. And to follow it up with this seems a little casual because Black can solidify the pawn structure with e6, which is what Strangle did. What was Shirov's follow-up? Exactly. g4. Beautiful attacking play by Shirov here. because the idea of having this rook is to be able to bring that rook to g1 and have the other rook on f1, both pointing directly at the king. And yes, white is down a piece, but white is completely winning the game because these pieces are completely out of play, and because of the lack of space that black has, black can't really get into play. In the meantime, white is just like ready to roll. I mean, takes, bring the rook over. These pieces are not ready to help in the defense over here. So, and this is just over. Queen to d8, pawn takes, rook to g1, getting the last piece into the attack. And now, with this king totally stranded, no coordination for the black pieces at all. Big, hefty attack toward the black king here. Queen to e7, and Shirov just crunches him here. Rook takes g7. The basic idea is if queen takes, there's rook to g1. And even though in this position black has 2 rooks for the queen, you realize that 2 rooks for the queen is only as good as their coordination. And here, they're not coordinated, and also the king is too weak. This pawn's rolling through. It's just terrible for black. So black took with the king. Shirov slid the rook over, said open sesame. Bishop takes h6. The pieces are flying into the attack. Black gives a little bit back. Black is a piece up. The problem is it's only, it's a piece up only in, I mean, it's like in a dream, because you're not actually using the piece. You're never going to use the piece. Rook g7, queen b4, and a3. Resign. Yeah, resign. Because if you go queen, if you go queen anywhere but this diagonal, then it's check, and checkmate. So you need your queen on this diagonal to support knight f8. So let's say you go queen to f8 here. There's check, and then here. Black is not only going to be down material, black is down a king, and this pawn is rushing up, which will create both mating threats and queening threats. Beautiful, beautiful game by Shirov. And it all, these things don't just randomly happen, right? All of this is a consequence of black having no development, no space, and no king. So Shirov pounced on that, because Shirov's like, well, I got to do something. Like, I'm fully developed. And the guy's not. I better pounce, right? I gotta pounce. I gotta do something. It's principled. I gotta jump. I gotta strike. Knight to g5 he'd played, and then Strangle didn't know the Latvian rule, which is that when a knight jumps into enemy territory and it's attacked by a pawn in such an elementary and in such an elementary fashion, it's not returning alive. So knight takes f7, beautiful follow-up to all of this, prying open the whole darn thing here. And then you guys saw the rest. So, really fantastic play, which seemed like a casual attack after the sacrifice of the piece. But the closed nature of the center, in conjunction with the open lines, weak king. I mean, it all spelled trouble for black. Very, very nice game. Okay, so this is the McCanis floor attack of the English Opening. We're not going to get into the theory. I don't even know the theory, but we're not going to get into it. Okay. So I can say that Parligra is not going to play like this again, because Queen c2 again. This was one of those, okay, let me distract you just a second while you're not castled. So g6 was played. And in all fairness, white hasn't castled yet either. But white is ready to castle. Black is ready to castle now because g6 broke the attack on the h-pawn. So for example, if black castled here, white takes that h-pawn for free. So black played g6 and is ready to castle. So white, David Navarra, is like, okay, I need to do something here because I'm ready to castle, and black's passive pieces are not going to be able to stop me from castling. I'm just going to, if I need to castle on the next move, I can castle. So what did white play here to take advantage of the fact that black has a harder time getting his pieces deployed, and therefore may have a harder time getting the king safe if white plays the correct move? I like your move. I like the suggestion of bishop to h6, suggested by some. I like that move. But there was an even stronger move played by Navarra, who's 2700 rated Grandmaster. This guy's a machine. e6. And what e6 does, first of all, of course, it attacks the knight. It also attacks the pawn on f7, and it weakens this phalanx of pawns because of the battery against the g-pawn. So, okay, black took, and then white played bishop to h6. If bishop to h6 first, this is also good, but the e6 possibility goes away after knight to c5, where black is now covering that e6 possibility, and it's just not as good. You do keep the king in the middle, but you have fewer attacking plans with the pawn on e5. So e6 weakens the pawn cover around the king, and then it was followed up with bishop to h6. So really a combination of what the chat has already said. So very good so far. Bishop to f6, and then castles to the queen side, Navarro. So he's very aggressive. He's looking for a great... By the way, I should say, after bishop h6, there was the threat of bishop captures g6 check, pawn captures would be the only move, followed by queen captures on g6 checkmate. So bishop f6 deals with that, because if you sacrifice now, as awkward as this looks, you're up a piece. Black is up a piece, and black will get the queen out of there. So bishop f6, castles queenside, queen to e7, rook to e1. Again, black can't castle, and white is just loading up on the center. So knight to c5, black... Here, okay, let me tell you what black wants to do. Okay, black wants to go here and castles to the queen side. So chat, it's your game now. I'm putting it in your hands, and I want you to try to come up with a move or a series of moves for white, which, you know, prepares to distract black from casually going bishop to d7 and castle. If black can do that, black will just be up material for no reason. So Navarra played very enterprisingly. He played g4, which I think is very strong. The idea is going to be seen in the game. So bishop to d7, black's like, I'm going to castle. Thank you. Navarra played g5. The only safe place for the bishop is bishop to g7. And now, Nikolai, bishop takes g6 is much more powerful, because with the bishop on g7, there's a fork on the bishop after this. So queen f7 isn't so easy to play anymore, because white gets the material back with the initiative which remains, right? The initiative has not worn off, despite the fact that the queens may get traded here. So that's what happened, and in order not to give this bishop back, black played king f8, and Navarra played rook takes d5, a crushing follow-up to this whole sequence of moves. I really liked g4, g5. I mean, that's really thinking outside of the box. But the purpose, again, of g4, g5 is force the bishop to g7 then play this sacrifice, so that way you just follow it up correct. Okay, king f8, rook takes d5, bishop takes h6, and then another strong move, rook f5, check. And again, this is all these Hollywood moves are a result of the fact that black's king is just stuck in the center. Pawn takes, rook takes, check, and then that picks off this rook. So as you can imagine, this is all going downhill for black, for Grandmaster Parligras here. And yeah. The pieces are pouncing. This was a very nice move. The idea is if you take here, I go g7, your knight doesn't guard that anymore, and I'm going to get another queen, one way or another. So nice little distraction move there. And after this, resign, because it's just too many pieces lost. It's too many pieces lost. Although this was a nice touch, c4, it blocks in the bishop. And if you take it, in the end, you lose the bishop. After pawn takes queen. So c4 was a nice touch because you can't really ignore it either because I'm threatening to get another queen. The purpose of c4 was to bring the bishop to a bad square. So, a very nice game. Hi, I'm Peter Giannatos, founder of the Charlotte Chess Center. Subscribing to our YouTube channel is statistically proven to limit your blunders.